Believe me or don't. In fact, when I told the cops, they just laughed. But what I saw in the sky that night defied logic, physics, and most of all, my own sanity. This is the story of the time I saw UFOs in the Australian sky. All right, get comfortable. Are you ready to hear a story? All right, so this happened when I was 29, a few hours up the coast from Sydney. There's a place called Coffs Harbour on the east coast, and inland from Coffs Harbour, about half an hour, is a small town called Karamba. And my cousin owned a property in Karamba up on top of this hill, and on that property was a small one-bedroom unit, like a really simple place. But it didn't have any TV or radio or mobile phone signal or anything, so it was a really cool place to go and just completely chill out off-grid. I'd been up there a bunch of times, and this one particular time I drove up and it was about 9:30 at night, and I realised, I haven't been outside and looked at the night sky yet. And that's a big bonus of being there, because there's no, like, the way the property was situated up on the hill was there was no light pollution, so it was a beautiful place to look at the sky. So I was like, sweet. So I walked out and I drove a van, and so my van was parked outside, and I went out to the front of the van and sort of leant back against it, my back over the bumper bar and leaning against the windshield and looking up at the night sky and just thinking about how awesome it was. And then I noticed some lights distract me further down through the trees. And on top of the hill, there were all these like sporadic gum trees with quite a bit of space between them, but sporadic gum trees where you could see through to the night sky. And through those gum trees, across a way, I could see this row of lights flashing. I thought, that's weird. They must have just switched on some roadwork lights. And I'm thinking, okay, so like equal height to what I am across there is another hill, and on that hill must be a road, and on that road must be some roadwork, and they've just switched all the lights on to start doing the roadwork. And I'm looking at it going, oh, that's weird, because like the truck, whatever it is, like it must be a truck. It's moving sort of back and forth, up and down on this road through there. And I can see it through the gum trees, shining through, and I'm like, oh, that's a big truck. And then like after a while of watching it, I'm like, wait a second, there is no hill. There is no hill over there. Like during the day, that's just, when you look through there, that's just open sky. So I'm like, there's no way there's a truck or anything on a hill there. So that has to be in the air. Whatever that is floating in the air. So then I'm thinking, okay, so it must be a helicopter. And at this point, it's sort of moving greater distances, and I'm watching it like through the trees, cover greater distances and stop, and then moving back, sort of back and forth. And I'm like, okay, so it has to be a helicopter. The only thing that can be that big and that close and moving that way is a helicopter. Then I'm like, but there's no sound? And as soon as I thought that, I was just like, what? Like, just got that weird shiver. And then it just sort of went, I'm making that sound, but it was silence. It just took off and then out of view. So I'm like, what the was that? Like, my mind's just buzzing. And then at this point, I had no belief in UFOs or any of that. 20 years ago, the only place I'd sort of seen UFO phenomena was on fictitious TV shows like The X-Files. But I had read reports of people seeing UFOs, but in my mind, they were all just, it was a bit of a conspiracy theory, crazy subject. So I didn't really entertain it. But at that moment, I remember just thinking, wait, did I just see what people called UFOs? Like, am I now one of those people that's seen some weird thing floating in the sky that didn't make sound and took off at a crazy speed? And anyway, as I'm thinking this, I'm like, I can't just leave it at that. I need to see more. So I ran and grabbed the car keys, ran back, jumped in the van, drove down the hill, and then turned onto the road going inland again in the direction where I knew I'd seen it. And I drove for about 5 minutes before, and I was thinking, oh, there's no way I'm gonna see this thing again. And then as I came around this bend, like up until this point, it had sort of been closed off the scenery being closed off. But then as I came around this bend, I saw right out across the bushland, like a massive view, like full sky, bushland, and bang, there's this craft hovering above the trees. It's hard for me to gauge distance exactly, but it seemed to be what I would guess like 500 meters to 800 meters away. And it looked like the size of like between one bus and two buses long, and it had lights all along it, and the lights were sort of flash blinking on and off. So like reds, greens, purples, like a mix of colors. And it's just hovering above the trees. And I'm like, what the hell? I'm in the van just going, stop the van. I'm like, what the hell is that? And then it just starts doing these massive movements, like shooting across the sky and coming to a dead stop. And then shooting back across the sky and coming to another dead stop. Like, you know, your classic UFO behavior that people talk about. I'm watching it and I'm just going, this is insane. Like, I can't believe I'm sitting here watching this. No one around, obviously, to witness it with me, which was deeply frustrating. And it's going for quite some time, like, and I'm thinking any second it's just going to take off. But because it keeps going, and it got to about, I think like 10 minutes I'm watching this already, I was like, well, I might get a better view. So I got out of the van, climbed up onto the roof and sat on the roof racks. I had these huge roof racks on the van. So I'm sitting on the roof racks like this, just watching this thing, and it would shoot like away from me and then come towards me and stop. It never really got closer than that initial like spot where I saw it, about 500 meters away. But then it's mainly just shooting right across the sky, stopping dead stop, and then diagonally across and stop, and then down like diagonally and then dead stop. And as it's going, I notice it starts to wobble in the middle a lot. So like it's sort of going like this and then stopping and then zip and then stopping and sort of wobbling in the middle. And then as it goes, it started to like split in two halves. So the bit where it's wobbling in the middle sort of breaks apart. And then it looked like half the craft was towing the other half. And then it would do that sort of back and forth like this. And then eventually, boom, one of the halves just breaks away from the other half. And all of a sudden it was two crafts. And I'm just like, what the One would shoot across the sky on its own while the other one stayed still. And then the other one would follow it and then just stop dead still next to it. And I'm just like, okay, this is getting ridiculous, but awesome. I didn't feel any fear. Like there was no point where I felt threatened or afraid, or I didn't even feel like they were aware of me, they, it, whatever it was aware that I was sitting there. So there's no feeling of fear whatsoever. It was more just like fascination, because it's a mechanically built thing with lights on it. So of course I'm just thinking, I'm now one of those guys. I am now one of those freaks that is seeing a UFO and no one is going to believe me. Like no one's going to believe this story. And then I remember I was even like looking around down through the countryside along the road, and you could see like driveways leading off down to different farms. And I was like, maybe I should just jump in the van, like get back in the driver's seat and drive down a driveway and wake up a farmer. Like, I mean, so this all started around 9:30 p.m. and then by now it's probably 10 p.m. I mean, it was going for quite some time. And I'm like, oh man, you know, I had a nose ring at the time. I was probably wearing tie-dye jeans or something. And I was like, if I rock up to a farmer's door and say, you want to come out and look at the UFO? He's just going to go, gotcha. So I gave up that idea pretty fast. But anyway, I'm still watching it. Massive trajectory all the way across the sky, the other one following the other one. And at one point, probably the most amazing thing they did, like visually, was they were right down low and then they did a full spiral all the way up into the sky, like the opposite to like if something was being screwed out of wood or something, the way that would operate, just like a massive tornado or something. There's these two things around in a circle like this, all the way up into the sky. It was almost like they were playing, like let's say, and this is, you know, this is 20 years ago, right? Well, almost 20 years ago. 18 years ago it was. So I mean, back then there was no part of my brain that was like, oh, these could be drones, because one, they were huge, and two, back then there were just no drones in the sky, like, that we know of, right? So, but the way they were acting was almost like they were playing, or how you could imagine, like, if two kids were operating drones who were really good at them, might play with them in the sky. But anyway, so I'm just watching, continuing to watch, just blown away, even to the point where I'm like, how long is this going to go for? Then eventually I notice right to my left, right off in the far distance, a normal passenger airline come into view, so like a Boeing. And as it comes into view, I look up at the two crafts and just ching, lights off, gone, completely gone. And I was like, oh my God, like they've turned their lights off or they've disappeared because there's a plane coming through the sky. So then I just sort of watched this Boeing come all the way across the sky, and I'm sitting there watching it just going, that is what an aeroplane looks like. That's what, like, my understanding of man-made aviation looks like as it flies all the way across the sky. And it was a great, like, contrast, because it allowed me to really think, that's how fast a jet looks at that distance. And I watched it go all the way. And as opposed to these things, which have just been shooting across the sky, and they look just as big, or, you know, similar in like together, similar in size. And I'm like, okay, that's what normal aviation is. What the hell is that? Anyway, the plane, just as it disappears out of view, and I'm thinking, well, the show's over, dunk, back on. Both crafts back in view, and then just keep buzzing around the sky for another like 5 minutes or so, until eventually they both just went and just shot off into the distance and completely out of view in like seconds, just gone. And that was when it was finally over. The whole thing was finally over. And I just sat there going, how the hell am I ever going to explain this to anyone without looking like a complete freak? And how do I explain it to myself? Like, I was absolutely stunned. Anyway, got back in the van, drove home, could hardly sleep. Woke up the next day, and because there's no phone or communication there, woke up the next day, and of course it's all I could think about. In fact, I grabbed the visitor's book for the place. Like, my cousin has a visitor's book there, and you know, it's got like different family members have stayed in that place, and there's like, oh, a lovely day today, we saw a kookaburra. Or someone else is like, we went for a walk and saw a goanna. It's such a beautiful place to escape to. And then there's my entry. Yeah, saw UFOs last night, so things got a bit weird. Anyway, I've actually found that visitor's book since, and read it all, and yeah, so it was good, because it was good that I wrote it down the next day, because it sort of confirmed exactly what I saw. So it didn't allow me to slowly stretch my imagination or add to it over time, because when I looked at the visitor's book, everything I'm telling you now is exactly what I read in that visitor's book, which I wrote down the next day. So I'm glad I did that. Anyway, I still wanted to talk to someone about it. I was like, oh man, I can't hold this in. And then I thought, well, the best person to talk to would be someone else that saw it. Like, I need to bounce off someone. And I was like, how am I going to find someone that saw it? I thought, well, surely someone saw it. And if someone lives around here and they were watching it like I was, maybe they went to the police and reported it, because if you lived in the area, you might think, well, what are these things near my house? You know, you might think it was military or whatever, but whatever it was, you might want to know. So anyway, I thought, okay, I'm gonna go to the police, like the local police station, and ask them if anyone reported seeing it. So, get in the van, drive down, should have taken my nose ring out, but anyway. I drive down to the police station. I remember parking out the front and like sitting there for quite a while thinking, am I really gonna do this? Ah, man. And then I just built up the courage and went, whatever happens, just I need to find out. So I walk in, and there's sort of an entry, and I remember like there was a big sort of entry, like a counter where you go up and talk to the police behind the counter. And there was a few police scattered around, like a couple over at a photocopy machine or something, and a couple more sort of in through a doorway in an office, and then one over here talking on the phone or something. They were sort of scattered around. So I walk up to the counter, and two of the guys over here that are talking sort of turn around, and one of them calls out, "Hey mate, what's up?" And I didn't want to tell everyone, so I was like, "Oh, just wanted to have a bit of a chat, if you just want to." And he was like, "Yeah mate, what is it?" And I'm like, "Well, just wanted to have a chat about something, if you just want to." "Yeah, just come over." And then the other guys are turning around and they're going, "Yeah, well, what is it, mate? Speak up." And I'm like, "Oh man, can I just talk to someone? Like, I just wanted to talk to someone about something." And then all the cops are turning their heads and just going, "Yeah mate, you can talk away, what is it?" Classic country cops. And they're looking at me like I'm some mungwit hippie. And then I was just sort of forced. Suddenly I have a whole audience of cops, and I'm just standing there like an idiot. And I was like, okay. So I know this is going to sound weird. Worst opening. But I'm wondering if anyone reported seeing anything last night out in the bushland above, like in the sky above the bush. In Australia we call it the bush. You call it the woods in the States or elsewhere. And they're like, something in the sky? And I'm like, yeah, I was out last night, and I basically gave them a real brief description of what I saw. And they all immediately just started firing jokes out, like, "Oh yeah, what are the mushrooms like this time of year, mate? Good magic mushies?" And I'm like, guys, I know this sounds crazy, but I had no hallucinogenics, no psychedelics, no alcohol. I was completely straight. I know what I saw. And then one of them was even saying, "Oh, it was probably just people out bushwalking, like going for a night walk with their flashlights." And I'm like, mate, I grew up in the Blue Mountains west of Sydney, so I grew up doing a lot of hiking at night and camping. And I said, man, I grew up in the doing night walking and stuff, and there's I know what that looks like. I know what a couple of torches look like. This was huge crafts in the sky, flashing lights. Anyway, everything I've already told you. And anyway, they all just started one after the other cracking jokes until they were all just literally laughing at me. And I'm just like, just hung my head in shame and just turned around and just backed out of there. Just walked out and got in the van. And I remember sitting in the van and just going, wow, like, if this is how everyone has been treated that's tried to tell someone about their experience, then no wonder it's such a laughed at phenomena, and no wonder people aren't really taking it seriously, because it never gets to the next level of being reported, because it just gets laughed at. And so that really made me just go, whoa, like, you can imagine the doors opening in my mind around that. So, and actually when I went back to Sydney, I told a couple of friends, but even just based on their reactions, I was like, you know what, I'm not really going to tell many people about this anymore, because, I did look silly. And 20 years ago, like 18 years ago, it really was something that people just, like I had thought, was just a complete joke of a phenomena, that like, it wasn't real phenomena, it was just a conspiracy theory thing. It was straight out of the science fiction movies, and anyone that saw a UFO was either on drugs or making shit up or batshit crazy. And so anyway, that's my UFO story. I'd love to know if you've had one or seen anything, or know someone that's seen anything, or have your own, any story. Just hit the comments, let me know, because I love this whole topic now. In fact, it was about 5 years later, I just thought, you know what, I'm going to start looking into this again. And that's when I opened up the whole world of Navy, police, Air Force, NASA, all these different people, like people in society that we respect and look up to, and that we rely on for having solid points of view. and trusting their opinions and what they see. All of these people talking about their UFO sightings and interactions with UFOs and radar operators and, people seeing them, people pursuing them, people like catching them on radar and all that. And that's when I just suddenly felt like, oh, okay, it's not just me and a bunch of loonies. It's a real thing happening here. So I'm not saying anything right now beyond what I saw. There's a whole world of theories we can jump into about what it is, how they're being operated, how they're being driven or flown. But I just wanted to tell you the story of exactly what I saw, and that opens up the discussion. So there it is, my UFO story when I was 29. Hope you enjoyed. All right. Please hit the comments with some feedback. Stay safe out there. And as always, stay bent.